What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 93. We're here to recap week 5. It's hard to believe we're already through that and already through the month of September, the first month of the season. Um, I tell you what, it's been a wild season so far. A lot of contenders. I feel like at this point we've got 12 to 15 plus contenders that are teams that can make the playoff this year, which is really fun to say because you've got a lot of teams. There's a lot of teams that feel like they're still in it. Obviously, the SEC has been really entertaining so far, and we're going to jump right into our Week 5 recaps. And Carden, I just got to get your thoughts about the Ray Davis show in Lexington, Kentucky, Saturday morning because man, he went off and they ran it absolutely down Florida's throat, and there's nothing they could do about it.
Yeah, Florida looked like they did against Utah, man. I mean, defense couldn't stop, a leaky faucet. Offense really didn't take many shots. They couldn't really run the ball. I don't think they only had what Florida have 69 rushing yards on 30 carries or 29 carries. But yeah, Ray Davis had over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns with like 6 minutes to go in the second quarter. He was their offense in the first half. He was their offense in the second half. They kind of just ran the clock down in the second half. But I mean, like you said, it was the Ray Davis show. Florida just bad, poor tackling, man. I mean, they had so many missed tackles. Ray Davis went absolutely nuts. I mean, he even caught a pass. I mean, pass, I believe, 10 yards or 9 yards, what it says, had a touchdown off that, had 3 rushing touchdowns. I mean, the dude did it all. I mean, he was looking like Christian McCaffrey out there on Saturday. It blew me away. I thought that Kentucky was going to win. I mean, we talked about it last week. We felt like Kentucky was a little more established. Their program had a little more of their identity from them. I mean, Stoops has been there. This is his 11th year there, I believe. So, their program is definitely more established than what Florida is right now. But I did not expect it to be an absolute beatdown like this. The way Florida's been playing the last few weeks, I thought it was going to be somewhat competitive. But man, Vegas was completely wrong on this line this week.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I was really expecting a competitive game. I thought Florida, may have turned a little bit of a corner, after the Tennessee game, but they just have not been a good team on the road under Billy Napier. Period. I mean, I believe they're 1-5 on the road under Napier. So, which obviously they're not, where we, or where they're gonna be yet. We know that. I mean, they're not. Their roster's not to the standard of some other teams. But, I thought that Tennessee game was a really, strong sign for them. But yeah, Ray Davis, man, I mean, there were so many seams for him to run through and he's such an underrated running back. I mean, we talked about how big of a move that was for him transferring from Vandy to Kentucky.
Yeah.
What a big pickup that was for Kentucky. And I think he's just really proven it now on even a bigger stage, like what kind of player he is. And I mean, who would have thought too? Just looking at the quarterback stats, that's the crazy part about this game is, you look at Graham Mertz goes 25 of 30, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had the one interception that a ball got batted up in the air, a little high throw, but really wasn't his fault. But had a really good day. And then you look at Devin Leary went 9 of 20 for 69 yards. Like, I mean, if you would have told me those two stat lines, we'd be thinking this was going the other way.
100%.
So it just kind of shows you like how dominant Kentucky's run game was. I mean, obviously Ray Davis, know what he did, 26 carries, 280 yards. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. And they really just blew Florida off the line of scrimmage. He busted long run after long run after long run. So it was just really impressive what they were able to do, and obviously a big game for them in the SEC East, and sets up a huge matchup with Georgia this Saturday in Athens. So I'm
Which the
excited to see what
line
they
in
can
that
do.
game is huge. It's 14 and a half right now. If I'm betting tonight, I'm betting Kentucky 14 and a half. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I think they cover it for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, Georgia too hasn't started off games great. We'll get into that. Their game against Auburn here in a minute, but yeah, they have not got off to really a good start all year. Regardless of who they're playing, been more of a second half team, and obviously we know they're still working through some things, and at least at this point, they're not who they've been the last 2 years. They don't stop the run quite as well, and breaking in a new quarterback. I think Carson Beck's done a good job though, but yeah, it's gonna set up a really fascinating game. Two undefeated teams. I'm looking forward to that one. But this was a big statement win for Kentucky, and Florida's a team they haven't beaten much historically. So anytime they can do that and do it in this fashion is huge for them.
And I think it helps me out on my futures bet of under 5.5, because if they'd have won this bet, I'd have been in trouble. Or if they'd have won this game, Florida would have. I'd have been in trouble. But I think it's going to hit right on the nose at 5, so I think I'm going to be okay. So bring me my money, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they bounce back. They've been a little up and down. Obviously a bad game against Utah. They bounced back against Tennessee. Now kind of another dud. So be interesting to see kind of how they respond and. Going forward, obviously they've got a lot of tough games left on the schedule, as we well know already. But I want to kind of get into the Auburn Georgia game, and I kind of feel like we had it pegged perfectly last week. I'm really not surprised the way this game played out at all. Georgia ends up winning 27-20, but I was not shocked at all. Auburn jumped out to a lead, thought they would make some adjustments. I was a little surprised how well they ran the ball against Georgia. I wasn't sure, exactly how well they would be able to do that. And they really did it pretty effectively. I thought it was a good game plan, getting the ball out of Peyton Thorne's hands, as quickly as they could. Quarterback run game was big. I didn't have that on my bingo card of Peyton Thorne's legs.
Leading rusher.
Giving Auburn a lead for most of the afternoon. So that was certainly something, but kind of give me your thoughts on this. I feel like ultimately it played out about like we thought, but in the end, Brock Bowers just ended up being too much.
If you'd have told me going into this game that Auburn was going to rush for 219 yards, I would have told you that Auburn was going to win this game. Honestly, Peyton Thorne leading rusher, and he was leading rusher by 33 yards. I mean, he had 92 yards on 12 carries, while Jarquez had 59 yards on 19 carries. I did really enjoy the design quarterback runs that weren't Robbie. Obviously, love seeing Robbie run, but using Peyton's legs. I mean, he's not the runner that Robbie is, but he's got some mobile aspects to his game. He's not slow by no means, and helped Auburn out in the first few drives, running around the end down there in our own red zone, or in Georgia's red zone territory. I believe they were on the 12, and or in Auburn were on the 12-yard line, and he ended up taking around the end for like a 30, 40-yard gain, something like that. Ended up not coming away with 7, though, right there really hurt. I mean, coming away with 3, you got to get points. I get it. But not coming away with 7 there really, really did hurt. The Auburn passed the ball a lot better, too. There was a bunch of drops. I believe there was 5 or 6 drops that should have been called. I mean, they were contested, but 100% Auburn's receivers should have come down with it. Peyton only completed 10 passes, should have completed at least 15. This was the 6th game in a row against Power 5 competition where Auburn was held under 100 passing yards. I thought that was a little frustrating. The receivers have been a better part of from what we've been used to the last 2 or 3 years, and they just didn't come through in big-time moments this past weekend. But all in all, man, Auburn played a hell of a game. The defense kept them in it. But I know that the Heisman is a quarterback award, and here and there a wide receiver award, used to be a running back award. But if the Heisman is supposed to go to the best player in college football, Brock Bowers needs to win the Heisman, man. Because I'm telling you right now, Georgia would not be undefeated without him. They would not have beat Auburn. They would not have won 2 weeks ago when they were down against help me out.
South Carolina.
South Carolina, yes. He wouldn't have been in the game against South Carolina. They would not have pulled that one off. He is the sole reason that they won this past weekend, though, 100%. He's the best player on the field every time he suits up, no matter what team he's playing against. Going to be an early draft pick this year, I believe. I mean, it feels like we've been seeing him for 8 years. The dude's put up hellacious numbers. He's going to put up some of he's going to put up the all-time tight end numbers in one less year than all the other tight ends who were on that list. So in my opinion, he's the Heisman Trophy winner because he is hands down the best player in college football. But Auburn was able to slow their run game until like the back end of the third, and then the fourth quarter they kind of just wore us down a little bit and kind of started breaking away. But man, Carson Beck, he played a hell of a game. Stepped into some pressure at times, completing throws, getting hit. He dropped some balls and some buckets too. I mean, I believe he had over 300 yards. Yeah, 313 yards, one touchdown. He did have an interception though, but I mean, all in all, Auburn played a lot better than I was expecting Auburn to play. Again, if you'd told me that Auburn was going to rush for 219 yards, I would have thought Auburn was going to win this game because they haven't done that all year. They haven't been able to establish the line of scrimmage on either side of the football, really. And that they did that this past weekend. And man, I would have rather lost 30-0, to be honest. The losses, the way that Auburn lost this past weekend, hurt so much worse than just getting absolutely dominated. Because if you just get ran out of the stadium, you just know, man, we weren't the better team. But coming away from that game Saturday, I can't honestly say that Auburn wasn't the better team. I mean, things like that hurt. There were small little miscues that Auburn had, dropping passes, turning the ball over. It just not being able to get a push for 1 yard on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, not being able to extend drives, man, things like that. That just, man, it really, really stings. So losses like that really hurt. I mean, they said there was reports that players were in tears in the locker room, and they said it seemed like that Hugh Freeze had joined them in tears in the locker room when he came out for his media presser. So it's good, obviously, to know that the loss hurts and that they care that much. But man, having the number one team on the ropes all game, and you were playing better than them all game, and then just letting it slip away, that really does hurt.
Yeah, I thought what was fascinating about the game is you look up in the third and fourth quarter and Auburn's got the lead, with 45 passing yards. It's just so crazy. Like you don't beat Georgia by running on them.
No.
And Auburn was very close to doing that, which is crazy to see. And like you mentioned too, I mean they played better than them for a lot of the game, but there's just a few plays you got to make, when they're there against this team. It's such a thin margin for error that, you got to come down with some of those 50-50 balls they just weren't quite able to come down with. And ultimately, like I said, Brock Bowers kind of took over. I'm with you. I think he's the best player in the college football. Yeah, I mean, if the Heisman goes to the best player, it should go to him. I mean,
1,000%.
And to be honest with you too, I think he is definitely top three. I think he's one of the best tight ends in the NFL the minute he gets drafted.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's that kind of player, like, I mean, I see him. Obviously, you never know with health and things like that, but if he stays healthy, he's going to have a huge career. I mean, he's going to be like some of the great tight ends you see now, like Travis Kelce. Obviously, what a career he's had, and I think he can have that kind of impact, and I think he can go down as one of the greats. He's just a complete mismatch. It should be unfair or it should be outlawed to be that big, that athletic, like that nimble for that, and that, I mean, that physical. I mean, he's the entire package at tight end. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Just a guy of his size at that position should not be able to move like he moves. I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, the last touchdown they scored when he ran that little crossing route, I mean, it's like Auburn didn't have a prayer to tackle him, dude. I mean, it was weak tackling on that play. They've been going after him all game. They've been, at least wrapping him up and getting him down. He was getting a few extra yards, but they weren't letting him, just break away. But man, that last play or that last touchdown for Georgia, it looked, obviously they weren't scared, but it looked like our guys were scared to hit him. It's like they were just laying their hands on him and standing up tall. Yeah. Tackle him.
Look like ping pong balls just bouncing off a pinball, I guess you could say, just bouncing off of him, man. I mean, he's so hard to bring to the ground, and he's so athletic in the open field. It's like, who do you even put on him? I mean, linebacker can't keep up with him. Safety's too small. I mean, there's no great answer for him. And I like what you said about Carson Beck, though. I thought he played a heck of a game. First time on the road as a starter. And he did exactly what he needed to. And to be honest, what he needed to do was look for number 19 and give him the ball. And that's exactly what he did. And that's what he should have done. That's what he needs to keep doing. So I thought he played really well. Obviously Auburn jumped up 10-0. Atmosphere is going wild. I just thought he never got rattled, never got flustered. They just kind of stayed the course and made the plays down the stretch. But it was a great game. And like I said, I wasn't surprised that Auburn played them as tough as they did. I mean, it's always like you always got to be like weary of a team that goes out on the road, loses. They're coming home. They're in that they're in that kind of fighting for their life mode. Like they just lost a game, pretty handily.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the number one team coming in. Everybody's going to be ready for it. They're going to make their adjustments, and they bounced back and gave them a heck of a game. So I wasn't surprised in the least that they played them as well as they did.
The only negative thing that I can say about Auburn playing this game was allowing the 98-yard touchdown drive. I mean, you're up, you got them pinned deep, and you allow them to march straight down the field. They ran it pretty well. I mean, they were pretty balanced on that drive. They threw it a couple of times. Brock Bowers made a couple of really good catches on that drive, but allowing them to march 98 yards down the field and come away with 7, that let Georgia back in the ball game, gave them a little more momentum, and let them know that, hey, there's a chance, and we still got this game. We're still in control of this game. When they were able to drive back down that long, it's like it might be over now. Georgia's probably going to win this game. They always have a drive like that in every game. Maybe not 98 yards, but they have a drive where they are clicking on all cylinders, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. They had one drive like that really this game, and it was that 98-yard touchdown drive. And when that happened, it's like kind of took the wind out of the Auburn sideline for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And it was kind of one of those things like Auburn, had the lead for a lot of the game, but it never felt, like
Right.
Georgia never felt they were out of it, never panicked. They just teams like them when they've been in those battles before, that they just don't get flustered. They don't panic, and they just kind of stayed the course, and you felt like, okay. And like you said, that drive was key, and it's like, okay, they're probably going to find a way to win in the end, but they just never panicked. They just kind of stayed the course like they have so many times, and found a way at the end. But yeah, credit to Auburn. The main thing for them is they just need to take this game like, they play the number one team, wire to wire, but you just can't have a letdown after this. You don't
Right.
want to play up and play down, so to speak. And not saying they will, but you just don't want to allow that to happen, and kind of build on that performance. And they got a lot of big games left, so this is definitely a big step in the right direction, and give them a lot of credit, because I mean they don't have the roster to compete with Georgia. Like that shouldn't have been as close as it is. So give the staff credit for kind of getting the most out of what they have, and because they're still a year or two away. They're a couple cycles away from really being where they need to be. I mean, you can't make it up in one cycle or one transfer portal class. But give them a lot of credit and for giving them the game that they did, because I thought they played really well.
Future's definitely bright. You're playing, like you said, with a quote unquote depleted roster compared to what Georgia has, and to play Georgia down to the wire with the team that Auburn has right now, it really does show that the future is very bright down there on the plains. Hugh Freeze is doing something special. He's got the guys bought in, and they said at the beginning of the game on the broadcast that Hugh Freeze was calling plays this week. He said he took over from Philip Montgomery, and that he was calling the plays. My only question is, why not take over in the second half of the Texas A&M game? You're only down 3 at halftime. Why not take over the play calling duties there? Because they said there was not one single RPO ran in the Texas A&M game, and Auburn ran like 8 or 9 of them and were successful on just about every single one of them. And, like you said, they were able to get the ball out quick. I thought Peyton only had 1 sack where he should have got rid of the ball. The other ones, they got on him really quick. There's nothing he could have done about it. He tried to escape one of the pressures, and he ended up getting tripped up. So all in all, the future is very bright for Auburn under Hugh Freeze. That they're going to be better. Again, you got to give them time. The recruiting cycle, he's doing really well this year's recruiting cycle. He's going to continue to recruit well. especially when recruits are going to a game like that on campus and seeing the atmosphere and seeing how much it means to the Auburn people. It's definitely easier to recruit to a place like that. So I'm not upset at all. It was just more, hurtful. Like, damn, man, we let this one slip away and played so good to just have your heart broken at the end. But that's the recipe of being an Auburn fan.
I want to ask you about something that was said today. So at a press conference today, I think he was at an event. You may have heard this too, but there was a clip of him talking about this game and him getting to experience it the first time, being Auburn's head coach. And he said a quote right after that that's like, I enjoy playing in these type of games and I'm going to miss playing them every year. And I wonder if, he not that he meant to say that, but like, I wonder if he dropped a little hint that they may not be, this may not be played on a yearly basis anymore, because we know what's happening next year with the, expanded, SEC,
Yeah.
schedule and obviously the 3 permanent opponents. So I wonder if he kind of dropped a little hint there that this game may not be played annually anymore, which I think would be very sad. So
I really hope that that's not the case. Obviously, you're going to have Alabama every single year. Auburn and Alabama are going to play. That game is going to be kept for sure. No matter how they slice it up, Auburn and Alabama are going to play every year. It does suck that your other biggest rival is the best team in the country the last few years. It's probably going to continue on that trend, being a top 5 team in the country. It's hard. It sucks playing those teams every single year. But I do hope that Auburn and Georgia continue to play every year. I hope it's not an every other year because that's one of the most fun weeks of the year. I'm glad they don't play back to back anymore like they used to. That was really tough. But it's one of my favorite weekends all football season, right next to the Iron Bowl. So I hope he's not foreshadowing anything that's going to come in the future. I really hope Auburn and Georgia line up and bang heads every single weekend or every single year. But I did hear that, or I saw it on Twitter. I hope he was just saying, in the grand scheme of things, all the great football games that they play in the SEC. But yeah, you're right. I believe he was foreshadowing something a little bit that Auburn and Georgia is going to be an every other year type deal. And that unless they make it to the SEC championship and play each other every year, which the odds of that happening every single year is not high. So I really hope that's not what he was trying to allude to, but it did sound like that for sure.
yeah, I mean, kind of getting into Alabama, Mississippi State now, obviously, that's another rivalry that's not going to be, played on a year in, year out basis. And they happen to be the closest, schools in proximity to each other. And they've been playing for all these years now. So, and I know it's not one of the premier rivalries, obviously it's been one sided the last, 15 or so. But it's hard to see that they're getting rid of the Battle of Highway 82.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, Highway 82, it's about as famous as Route 66. So I mean, yeah, I don't know how you can get away from this rivalry, but looks like it's gonna be going away. I'm gonna hate, beating up on Mississippi State every year, but I guess it's gonna happen every 2 years now. So but no, I'm just playing, but kind of getting into the game a little bit. Alabama started off pretty slow. Cowbells are ringing. It's late at night, 8 o'clock kickoff, which I'm not a fan of at all. I hope that's the last one for the year.
Yeah,
It was kind of one of those things where the game's over and I'm like, okay, Pac-12 after dark, and then I'm like, oh wait, we were the Pac-12 after dark tonight. So, but yeah, I had to hit it after that, man. Those 11 o'clock end times or after is tough, but Alabama kind of got off to a slow start. Thought they picked it up, kind of late first quarter after the first couple series. Defensively, I thought they were really good. This, for whatever reason, has just not been a good matchup for Mississippi State's offense. I mean, Will Rogers is as good as Will Rogers been and the records he's broken. He did throw his first touchdown pass, but I believe he's thrown 7 or 8 interceptions. So 1 touchdown to 7 or 8 picks. Is crazy considering the career that he's had at Mississippi State. has never been a good matchup for them. When it was the air raid or this current offense, they just have never had much success. I mean, this was actually the first touchdown pass Mississippi State has thrown since 2014, the
Wow.
other night. I mean, 9 years without a touchdown pass. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I thought I knew it had been a long time. I heard the stat going into the game, but I like when I thought about it again, I was like, wow, that's insane.
That's when
But
Dak was there.
yeah, I mean that was when they were number one. They came into
Yeah.
Tuscaloosa ranked the first ever playoff rankings. That's when you had Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Auburn, three of the top four spots, the first rankings ever. So, um, but yeah, that it just hasn't ever been a good matchup for them. They lost the turnover battle 3-0. Again, thought Alabama's offense, was able to run the ball better as the game went on. Um, thought Milroe managed the game pretty well. I mean, they didn't ask him to throw the ball a lot. He only threw 12 passes, but he was effective when he did it. Thought there was a few times, he's still developing, and there's some times where he could have got rid of the ball instead of taking a sack or, taking a loss. He got hit on the sideline a couple of times where he could have just threw the ball away. So there's quite a few things to clean up still. Thought Mississippi State ran the ball a little bit better than I thought. They had, pretty decent success running the ball, but they really couldn't throw it much at all. So they, I guess mission accomplished. You want to make them one dimensional, which they were, but all in all, I thought it was a pretty good performance. Kind of another step in the right direction, I think you could say, even though you didn't get off to the start that you wanted. But man, it's setting up for a huge matchup this weekend at Texas A&M. I mean, they're the only two, undefeated teams in the conference left in the West already, which is crazy to say. So really, whoever wins this game Saturday is going to be in the driver's seat. With LSU losing the other day to Ole Miss, so going to be a crazy one. And College Station's only a 2.5 point line at the moment, so I'm pretty nervous about this game coming up. But what were your thoughts from the game against Mississippi State?
I thought let Jalen Milroe run the ball a lot more. The dude gets one step on a guy, he's gone. House call every time. He is the fastest guy on the field. He's one of the fastest players I've ever seen. When he split the middle and split the two safeties, taking that his first touchdown run to the house, I was blown away with the speed. Like I knew he was fast, but I didn't know exactly how fast he was. I mean, I had heard stories and I've seen him, but man, he turned on the jets on that run. Like you said, I mean, he was effective in the passing game when they asked him to be, but they really just dominated on the run game. And they ran the ball 43 times for just under 200 yards, had 3 rushing touchdowns. So they really controlled the clock and just, ran it down Mississippi State's throat. Mississippi State didn't have an answer. They held Will Rogers to 107 yards, which, like you said, is pretty much been the case for Alabama versus Mississippi State when it comes to the quarterback. He had 3 picks. I believe they had a pick 6. Alabama, I believe, had a pick 6. So, I mean, I like the game plan on Alabama's side. They didn't ask Jalen Milroe to do too much. And they just leaned on the run game, leaned on that offensive line, and they were able to come away victors. But it was close. It was really close the first early part of the game. But then when Alabama got settled in and, found their identity of what they needed to do to Mississippi State, they kind of just ran away with it. And it wasn't even close in the second half.
Yeah, and like I said too, just for whatever reason, it hasn't been a good matchup for Mississippi State. Alabama's defense is kind of really dominated, been able to turn them over a lot and just kind of get them out of their game plan a lot of times. So really wasn't surprised with that and wasn't overall too surprised with the performance. I am worried about this matchup with Texas A&M. They're really good up front, and Alabama obviously is not a pass first kind of team. I mean, they haven't been terrible, but they're not super effective passing the ball. So, and especially if they can't really get the run game going against A&M, or especially like they want to. So I am pretty concerned about this game. I think this is probably you could say the biggest game left for them. I feel better about the matchups later on in the season against like Tennessee and LSU than I do this one. Just based on not that A&M's necessarily better than Tennessee or LSU, but it's just more so the matchup, perspective of it, and being at Kyle Field and the way these matchups have been the last 2 years. I mean, they've been, nail biters down to the wire both ways. So always makes you nervous going out there. It's a really tough place to play. They've got a really good front. They've been super disruptive. And, if you're not able to really run the ball effectively, it kind of takes you out of your game plan. So I'm pretty nervous about this game coming up. A&M, even though they've lost Connor Weigman, Max Johnson is an experienced quarterback. I mean, it's very valuable to have a backup with that kind of experience. So, kind of what are your thoughts on this game looking ahead to Saturday? Because it's going to be like two hammers hitting each other this way. I mean, it's going to be good on good. Their front, our front. Alabama's run game. Should be a pretty interesting matchup from that standpoint.
Yeah, things are definitely in A&M's favor just on the side of outside of the quarterback. Alabama's biggest weakness this year has been the offensive line. In the last 2 weeks, especially Texas A&M's strong suit has been the defensive front, man. I mean, they got after Auburn. They got after KJ Jefferson this past week when they played at Arkansas. I mean, they were on eating his lunch. It seemed like every single snap he had 2 or 3 guys that he was running away from or getting brought down by. They're really, really good at getting to the quarterback. I mean, we've talked about this recruiting class, till our freaking eyes bleed. I mean, we've talked about them so much. They're really good. They're coming into their own. They're starting to, play to the expectation of what everybody thought they could be. So I think Alabama's going to win this game, but I do think that that there are some things. A&M's strength is going against Alabama's weakness. So I think that helps A&M for sure, because defensive wise, like I said, man, that front seven for A&M is that they're nasty, man. They like to get after the quarterback, and the way Alabama's offensive line's been struggling the last few weeks, I mean, they really haven't found their true identity and started gelling perfectly yet. Jalen Milroe is going to have to lock in, and he's going to have to play one of the better games that he's played ever, because they're going to come after him. They're going to send pressure. They're going to send disguise blitz like they've been doing all year. They're going to get to the quarterback. Bama's going to get sacked a couple of times, but can they manage it? Can they establish the run game like you were talking about and not have to lean on Jalen Milroe too much to throw the ball and bail them out too often? Because they're going to get after him. They're going to be back there. And if Alabama can settle in and just give Jalen Milroe a little bit of time and give their running backs just a gap or two to open up for half a second, give them something to hit, I think they'll be okay. But it's definitely A&M's strength going against Alabama's weakness. So I would be nervous as well for sure, but I do think Alabama's going to end up winning the game. But the only thing I'm saying that is because Texas A&M, they turned the ball over a fair amount of times this weekend. I believe they threw 2 picks and had an interception had a fumble or 1 pick and lost a fumble. But Max Johnson, he's no backup for sure. I mean, he is a starter. He's just starter B. He's a baller. He's done really well. I mean, he played really well against Auburn when he came in the second half. He played really well against Arkansas this past week, minus the turnovers. But he's done what they've asked him to do and some. So I think Alabama's going to win this game, but I would not be shocked at all if A&M came out and was able to win this game next week, because like I said, it's A&M's strength versus Alabama's weakness, and I'm excited to watch this game.
Yeah, I like I said, I'm nervous about the matchup. I mean, because if they're able to slow Alabama's run game down, Alabama's got to stay out of obvious passing downs. Mm-hmm. Like you cannot live 3rd and long, 3rd and 7 plus. You got to keep it 3rd and short. That's how this offense is going to be successful. Got to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Think you'll see some quarterback runs. So try to loosen them up a little bit. But if they can give him time, you saw what, and not that Alabama's going to do what Tyler Van Dyke did, but there were some plays to be made. Like if he can have time to do it, there's probably going to be opportunities there, whether they hit them or not. We'll see. But I don't think Alabama's going to be able to do that what Miami was able to do. So if they're going to attack them, it's going to be a little bit differently. But Alabama has hit some deep shots down the field, so maybe they're able to do that. But I am a little bit nervous, just about the matchup. I do think Alabama's offensive line has improved. They've gotten better for sure. But like I said, though, you want to stay out of those obvious passing downs of letting them tee off on Jalen Milroe. You want to, you want to be able to be balanced and stay in those, second and third and shorts where, they're not able to pin their ears back and get after you. So, yes, it's going to be a heck of a game, and the winner is going to be in the driver's seat in the SEC West. So, yeah, it's going to be a heck of a game, heck of a crowd, and I'm excited to see it unfold.
Absolutely. What were your thoughts on this Texas A&M Arkansas game? I mean, early on it was kind of back and forth, trading blows, but then A&M settled in and just took it all. I mean, took it to the races, man. I mean, they took Arkansas to the woodshed. KJ Jefferson, we talked about last week when they played LSU that Arkansas picked up the pressures pretty well. They were giving KJ Jefferson some time. He was able to move around the pocket and extend plays with his feet. But this past week, KJ Jefferson had no time at all. They did not pick up the pressure whatsoever. Like I said, it seemed like every single snap that they dropped back, he had 2 or 3 guys in his face, bringing him down. They were touching him. They were bringing the pressure, and he was feeling it. They caused him to throw a pick, I believe. Max Johnson did throw a pick six. He kind of forced that ball, not forced it, but he definitely, the DB bit on it as soon as he dropped back to make the play. It was a little screen pass to the wide receiver. He definitely eyed that ball, or eyed the receiver down as soon as he took the snap. And so the DB, I mean, one of the easiest pick sixes you'll ever see. He stepped in front of the play as soon as he let the ball go. It's like he do it right to the DB. The DB ran it like 25 yards to the house, and then you thought, I believe it was 17-13 at the time. You're like, okay, Arkansas may have, they may claw their way back in this, make it a tight game. But, I mean, after that, A-Chain went, or not A-Chain, Zero.
Yeah, they got Le'Veon Moss. I mean, had a pretty good evening. I'm really impressed with Reuben Owens, the freshman running back for A&M. They're trying to get him more involved.
Nye Smith, who I was thinking
Nye
of.
Smith,
they connected with him a couple of times for a bunch of big gains. So they ended up, taking off in the second half and really dominating. And they had a pick six of their own. But, I mean, KJ Jefferson, he had no time to do anything. That offensive line got blown up damn near every single play. I mean, they ran the ball. I mean, I'm on the wrong team. They run the ball 39 times for 42 yards. That cannot happen. And they only completed 9 passes for 132 yards. So Texas A&M's defense was absolutely stellar this past weekend. But for Arkansas to carry the ball 39 times and only have 42 rushing yards, that's embarrassing, honestly.
Yeah, and I really felt like A&M's miscues really just kept Arkansas in it. You mentioned the pick six, and like I said, I mean, give Arkansas credit. I mean, that was just kind of watching film, and hey, that's a route they're going to throw. When he turns his body like that, hey, he's throwing it out in the flat quick. He read it, jumped it, and scored on it. And then thought Max Johnson had another kind of bad fumble deep in their own territory.
He got popped.
Yeah, got popped. So that they had another turnover. So that they actually lost the turnover by 3-1. So I felt like their miscues kind of kept Arkansas in it, got them some short fields, got them some free points, and kept them in it, like you said, because offensively Arkansas couldn't do anything at all. I mean, that the A&M defensive front just kind of took the game over. So hopefully those miscues will kind of come back up again on Saturday. But yeah, it really didn't feel as close as the score indicated. I mean, if you look at the stat sheet, and A&M doubled them up on yards, and it just felt like those turnovers and some miscues by A&M, really kept Arkansas in it, kind of gave them some life throughout the game.
Absolutely. We gotta talk about this LSU Ole Miss game. I mean, we talked about the great defense and the Texas A&M played this past weekend. There was absolutely no defense in this Ole Miss LSU game. You said it would be in the 30s. You were right. It was in the 30s in the first 10 minutes. It seemed. I mean, the over-under for this game was set at 65.5. It may have closed at 66.5. The final of the first half was 58. So you knew the over was going to hit. There was 13 or 14 touchdowns scored in this game. Absolutely no defense whatsoever. But I thought Ole Miss, I mean, they were like LSU was pretty balanced too, but Ole Miss was as balanced as you could be. They threw the ball for 389 yards and they ran the ball for 317 yards. Threw the ball 39 times, 26 completions, and they ran the ball 49 times. Had 3 touchdowns on rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns and 4 passing touchdowns. I thought that Lane Kiffin had a fantastic offensive plan. He had the plays he ran just had LSU's defense out of position time after time after time. They kept running the short crossers. They were hitting them for big gains. I mean, Trey Harris had a really, really good game. Brian Thomas had a fantastic game. I mean, it seems like every time they're close to the end zone, they need to throw a back corner fade. They go to him and he catches it damn near every single time. He obviously Neighbors is their best receiver, but Brian Thomas, I feel like he's their go-to guy when it comes to the red zone or a shorter field. But I mean, the offense, if you like offense, go back and watch this game every single day because you're going to be pleased. But if you like defense, don't ever watch this game ever again. I believe there was like 1,200 total yards in this game, 1,300 total yards, something along those lines. Like I said, 13, 14 touchdowns. But I really, really liked the game plan that Lane Kiffin had offensively because, like I said, every single snap, it's like the LSU defense was out of position based on the scheme that and the routes that Ole Miss had set up. And then late in the game, they just started gashing them up the middle. They were running it down their throats towards the end of the game. But I mean, Jackson Dart has blown me away with the expectation. I mean, I didn't think he was going to be a bad quarterback, but I had no intentions of him being this good this year because he lit it up this past Saturday. I mean, I don't know, 26 for 39. I thought he'd have been 26 for 30. I mean, it seemed like every pass he threw was completed. I don't. He had a completion to a running back. I mean, I think he threw a touchdown to 4 different receivers. Yeah, 3 different receivers and a running back. So he was spreading the ball around the field for sure. But I thought that Ole Miss played a great game. They got down later in the game and just clawed their way back, and just wouldn't take no for an answer. They just kept fighting. And man, it was one of the best games I've seen all year. One of the best games I've seen the last 3 or 4 years, man. This was an exciting football game. And I'm glad Ole Miss came away with the win because I don't like either one of them, but I like Ole Miss a lot better than I like LSU. So I didn't mind seeing them lose. But I will say one thing about Jaden Daniels. That dude leads the nation in getting absolutely decleated. Every single game they've had, he has gotten absolutely blown up by a safety or a DB. And it happened again this week, and he ended up fumbling the ball. I mean, he made a couple guys miss, broke a tackle, and then got absolutely laid out. And ball went up in the air, and Ole Miss recovered it. But I thought that this was one of the most exciting games I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's definitely an early, game of the year candidate.
Yeah.
I know. What'd you say about 1,200 total yards? I think in that
something like that. I mean, Ole Miss had 389 passing yards, 317 rushing yards. LSU had 414 passing yards and 223 rushing yards.
Yeah, so there's 1,200 yards, and that's about how many missed tackles. Because I mean, it was, especially on those final couple drives for LSU's defense. And I'll be honest, I knew LSU's defense wasn't great. Wasn't really expecting them to be great this year. Figured they'd be solid. It's just not that they're not good; they are bad defense, which is surprise. I mean, obviously, we knew the questions were their secondary, ton of transfers. I mean, even Brian Kelly said preseason, he's like, "Hey, it's some red flags. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, we had to take more transfer guys than we were comfortable taking. Like, in a normal circumstance, and in the future, that's probably not going to happen for them again. Like, they're building that foundation. I mean, I think they took 12 transfers on defense, which, like I said, he said, like, hey, we really don't want to have to do that. Like, that's not our, option. That, we want to build a foundation here through high school recruiting where we don't have to be in a position like that. But even then, I didn't expect them to be this poor on defense.
Yeah.
And like I said, the tackling was really bad, and Ole Miss wasn't much better. They were just a little bit better. But I mean, like you said, these two quarterbacks, Jackson Dart playing as well as anybody in the country and not really getting talked about that much.
Yeah.
And same with Jaden Daniels. Like, he's playing about as well as anybody in the country. I mean, these two quarterbacks are playing better than anybody else in the SEC. And Spencer Rattler, he's in that conversation too. I mean, but these two guys are in complete control of their offenses. Yeah, like you said with Ole Miss though, man, they were so balanced. I thought one of the biggest signs for me was Quinshon Judkins looked like himself. You know, he's been banged up this year, but he looked to be back like the Quinshon Judkins we expect. I mean, thought he was tremendous in this game. Like you said, I thought Lane Kiffin called a heck of a game. Man, I mean, there were so many times too where their receivers were wide open. Man, they had quite a few like monumental busts in the secondary. And like I said, for LSU, same thing. Like you said, Brian Thomas Jr. was making plays. Malik Neighbors, just like he's done all year. Kyron Lacey, they were able to run the ball pretty well. And like I said, Jaden Daniels, he is so slippery, but there's a few times, man, he's just got to slide.
Yeah.
Like, he's just got to get out of bounds. Like, he is taking too many unnecessary shots. But like you said, if you love offense, this was the game for you. Defense was optional, and they both declined. I mean, it was something else. We knew, like, this is a recipe for a high-scoring game. Two high-scoring offenses in the SEC. Don't believe that changed any after this game. And two defenses that have question marks. But, man, it was way more than I anticipated. I thought they would find a way to muster up a few more stops, but just wasn't in the cards. Two great offenses going at it, some suspect tackling, and you got a 55-49 classic.
Yeah,
but this was
104 total points.
Yeah, this was a huge like signature win for Lane Kiffin. Like, he's had some nice wins, but he really hasn't had that one win where you're like, okay, that's really what we've been looking for, like that signature win you can put a stamp on. And I think he finally got it on Saturday night. Huge win for them to bounce back after the Alabama game. And not to make this about Alabama, but as I'm watching that game unfold and the Alabama game's kicking off, I'm like, after what Alabama's defense did to Ole Miss, and then what Ole Miss's offense did this week, I'm like, man, I feel even better about Alabama's defense the way they were able to just completely shut Ole Miss in their tracks. So that was a positive sign for me that I took away from it. But this game, man, that was crazy. I don't know if we'll have a better one all year, to be honest with you.
I would the only time that I really questioned either side was LSU was down. They were trying to drive it down. They were down 55-49. I think they had a minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever it was, to drive down and potentially win the game. And I believe it was second down or third down. They're on like the 30 or 40-yard line. And Jaden Daniels throws the ball kind of to the front corner of the end zone, probably around the 6 or 7-yard line. Good ball, but he threw it to Logan Diggs, the running back. I'm like, oh, at this point in the game, of all the people you got to throw to, you're going to throw it to your running back? What? I mean, the dude's not known for his hands. You got Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors out there. I know they probably have heavier coverage on them, but you're going to throw it to your running back in the crunch time of the game when you absolutely need it? I thought, whatever, do your thing. But I could not believe that that's the guy he targeted in that situation. I mean, give Brian Thomas a 50-50 ball. Give Malik Neighbors a 50-50 ball. Give him a 60-40 ball. It's a better shot than going to your running back far down. I mean, it was like a 30, 40-yard bomb. Whatever. I was scratching my head after that play.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I mean, Brian Thomas, he turns, 60, 40, 70, 30s into 50-50 his way. Or
that ball he caught in the front corner of the end zone when he had the defensive pass interference called and he still caught the touchdown pass. I'm like, how did you come down with that ball?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they got weapons, man. I mean, their offense is really clicking. And you look at the stat line that they put up and that Jaden Daniels put up, and it's like, as an LSU fan, you're like, you got to be kicking yourself. Like, man, like, he put that kind of performance together, and it still wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just insane. I mean, it kind of felt like the Bryce Young performance last year against Tennessee.
Yeah.
Like he's coming off the shoulder injury and wasn't even sure if he's going to play. And the dude throws for 4 and change, and you're like, puts up 49. You're like, man, that still wasn't enough. Like that's
Yeah.
insane, And I'm sure that's how they're feeling today, like, or on Saturday night. They're like, oh my gosh, like he had a heck of a game and still wasn't enough. Like you're LSU and you put up 49 on the road, you ought to win that 100 out of 100 times.
Yep.
And the fact that they didn't is crazy. But
And they were up for most of the latter part of the game. I mean, they had a touchdown or a field goal lead the most part of the latter part of the game. And like I said, Ole Miss just would not go away. That offense was just kept chipping until they finally knocked that tree down.
yeah, I mean that LSU was up 49-40,
Yeah,
late in the fourth quarter, and
with like 5 minutes left.
Ole Miss puts together 2 touchdown drives, and that's the point I was most disappointed with LSU's defense. I thought the defense on the game-winning touchdown for Ole Miss was literally pathetic. Honestly,
Horrible missed tackles when Trey Harris made that one guy miss. It's like that dude wasn't even trying to tackle him. Horrible miss. There was 2 guys. It was a screen pass. There was 2 guys, and he made them both miss and just ran to the corner of the end zone. I'm like, that was pathetic.
yeah, the one guy, he got on his heels trying to go after him, kind of stumble back, and then he's running to try to get him, and then he just gets absolutely pancaked. I mean, it was embarrassing, but no, it was a crazy game, signature win for Ole Miss that Lane Kiffin and them really needed. And it was fun to see and really shook up the SEC, West race. Ole Miss already had a conference loss. LSU didn't, so that gives them both. They both have one loss apiece now. Only 2, undefeated teams in the West, in conference play, and obviously, it's only going to be one after this weekend. So it's crazy. We're in early October and this much kind of chaos, if you will, has already happened. It's really a crazy season, and I feel like this year is unlike any other. I mean, you could literally sit and rattle off 12, 15 teams that you can make a legit case or playoff contenders and have a shot. I wouldn't say there's that many that can win a national title, but there's certainly that many that can make the playoffs for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to be a crazy, October, November for sure.
Absolutely. And what were your thoughts on the Tennessee-South Carolina game? Because early on, to me, I thought South Carolina had a chance to at least make it super close, to keep it within the number of 12 and a half. I think it closed at 12, maybe 11 and a half, but I think the highest it got up was 13. But I mean, I believe South Carolina won the turnover battle too. They just could not stop Tennessee on defense. I mean, Tennessee ran the ball. Let me pull this up. Tennessee ran the ball for 238 yards, and they threw the ball for 239 yards. They were about as balanced as you could be. Joe Milton threw 2 interceptions. But Jalen Wright, man, 16 carries, 123 yards, and a touchdown. At the back end of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, they literally handed the ball off and ran it straight up the gut, and we're getting 10 to 12 yards every single tote. I mean, it was like South Carolina didn't even want to be there. I felt like their defense really let them down. Spencer Rattler played another great game. I mean, he's doing everything he can do to keep South Carolina in the ball game. He's not getting a whole lot of protection. A lot of the times he's doing what he can, extending plays, but I felt like the defense really let him down this game.
Yeah, Tennessee, like you said, they were as balanced as you could possibly be. And I feel like, too, people that haven't really watched Tennessee this year don't really like you still seeing them put up, good point totals, but it's not in the same way as a year ago. They're really leaning more on the run game. They had 10 carries of 10 plus yards in this game. So like you said, they really gashed the South Carolina defense. And they're much better on the lines of scrimmage than they've been so far under Josh Heupel and here over the past, really 5 to 10 years or so. I mean, their defensive front is, I think, very underrated, not being talked about enough. They sacked Spencer Rattler 6 times. We've talked about the offensive line for South Carolina, and it's amazing that Spencer Rattler's played as well as he has because he's had everything on his shoulders. I mean,
Oh yeah,
he is just carrying this team on his back. I mean, and he's got good skill players, but his defense isn't really where it needs to be. His offensive line's not where it needs to be. So there's just so much on his plate that it puts him in a tough position, but he's handled it well. But really, the story for me is Tennessee on both lines of scrimmage. I mean,
yeah.
they're very much improved running the football. Big loss though, Brew McCoy, got injured. He's out for the season. So that, he's one of their big physical, weapons on the outside. Great blocker. So that's a really really tough loss for them. They've got some other weapons though, so I think they'll be okay. But it just hurts them from really a physical standpoint on the outside, and he's been a key player for them the last 2 years. But all in all, yeah, they really just kind of dominated up front, and I think that's where people are going to be surprised if they haven't really watched much of Tennessee this year, and how they've improved. So yeah, I think Tennessee's going to be really good going forward if they can continue, developing up front on both sides.
Absolutely. Uh, what's some games you want to cover for next week? I mean, we got a bunch of good ones in the SEC. Like you said, we already covered Alabama and Texas A&M, LSU, Missouri. Missouri's 5-0. You want to play a 3-2 LSU. I don't think Missouri's better than LSU, but I think that they're catching them at the right time because LSU are probably not. I'm not going to say they're not going to come out and play hard, but they're not as motivated. There's not that SEC championship game they're playing for now. There's not the national championship game they're playing for now. They're pretty much out of the championship hunts. I think Missouri could go in there and potentially stun somebody because they're playing. They're on their high horse right now. They're as excited and as locked in as they can be, finding a way to win every game they're in. I mean, the line's only 6.5. They're traveling to Missouri. What's your takeaway from this game going into this weekend?
Yeah, it's definitely a dangerous game. I mean, coming off obviously an emotional loss, a really tough, kind of heartbreaking loss to Ole Miss, and going on the road and playing a Missouri team, as you mentioned, that's really confident. They beat Kansas State at home, so they feel like they can compete with some of the top teams, in the country in the conference, and they're still undefeated. So yeah, it's going to be a huge game, and obviously it's always tough going on the road, 11 o'clock game. And like you said, kind of where's LSU's head going to be at? Still only one conference loss, so they still got Alabama, they still got A&M. I just don't think their defense is really
No.
correctable right away, so I don't expect that to happen. I just don't think they're going to be able to improve enough defensively, but I do think they bounce back in this game. Honestly, do think it's going to be a close game. I think Missouri's got a chance to put up some points, just like a lot of other teams have, but I think in the end, I just think LSU's offense will be a little bit too much. I would anticipate LSU bouncing back, but if they're not in the right headspace, this is definitely a team that's super confident, and it's a dangerous game on the road at 11 o'clock.
Absolutely. And what's your takeaways from Arkansas and Ole Miss, or what's your preview? Because the line's at 11 right now, and I know Arkansas they're 2-3. They've lost some games, especially later in the games that the other teams pull away. But like I talked about last week, they're in every game until down to the last few minutes. They're in every single game. And we just talked about Ole Miss having negative defense. It was optional and they both declined it, like you said. This Arkansas offense can move the ball, especially if they give KJ Jefferson some time in the pocket. They can move the ball. Rocket Sanders was back this past week. He ran the ball okay. I mean, they didn't run the ball, but for 40-something yards, he just ran it okay. But against this team, I think Ole Miss is going to win the game. But I do think that Arkansas is able to keep it within the number of 11. It's set at 11 right now. Ole Miss favored at 11 points. I think Arkansas is able to keep it within the number just because of Ole Miss is the lack of defense that Ole Miss has. What are your thoughts going into here?
Yeah, I'm expecting a pretty close game, honestly. I mean, I always like teams like coming off a loss, to respond. I mean, you usually kind of, I feel like you get the best version of themselves, and Ole Miss coming off an emotional win. It's kind of sets the stage for a dangerous type of game, even though it's at home. And I do expect Ole Miss to win, but I do think Arkansas, and that's the thing about Arkansas too, is you know what you're going to get with them. Like they're never going to roll over. Like they're always going to come out, bring their best effort. That's what a Sam Pittman team does, and so and they, like I said, they've got the weapons to be able to. Their offensive line hasn't played great, been pretty inconsistent, been okay at times, and then bad at other times. So, um, but Ole Miss is not a juggernaut defensively, so I think they can hang in there with them, and I think the stage is set for kind of a dangerous, game. Could be a little bit of a letdown for Ole Miss coming off that emotional win. You're going to get a hungry, Arkansas team that doesn't want to slip further behind. So, um, it's going to be a really interesting game. I mean, Arkansas is always going to bring it.
Absolutely. What's some other games you're looking forward to this weekend?
I mean, obviously we covered it, a little bit earlier. The Alabama A&M game certainly going to go a long way in determining the SEC West, or certainly whoever comes out on top of this game is going to be in the driver's seat. Always a tough game going to College Station. We know about that atmosphere. Their fans are about as good as anybody's as far as creating an atmosphere that benefits their team. This matchup's been crazy close the last 2 years. Alabama lost the last time in College Station. It came down to the final play in Bryant-Denny last year. Jalen Milroe's first career start. So I'm sure he's going to be motivated to have a better performance this time. I don't doubt that. He's from Texas. So a lot of Texas players on this Alabama roster. So kind of a little bit of a homecoming, I'm sure, for a lot of guys. But yeah, it's gonna be all out war. I mean, like I said earlier, it's gonna be two hammers hitting each other. Alabama's offensive line, like Alabama wants to run the football, A&M wants to dominate up front with their defense. So I'm curious to see who's going to kind of prevail at that. If Alabama can kind of keep it, second and third and manageable, as I said earlier. And then A&M obviously wants to put Alabama in obvious passing downs where they can pin their ears back and come after Jalen Milroe. So, I mean, it's going to be a battle of wheels, really. So I can't wait to see it. Should be a great matchup. It's going to go a long way to determining the SEC West. And then on the other hand, you got two undefeated teams in the SEC East, Kentucky going to Georgia. You're kind of just waiting on Georgia to have that 4 quarters of, typical Georgia football, that we've come to know and expect. So you're kind of wondering like when you're going to get that. But this Kentucky team's legit, though. I mean, we saw what Ray Davis did. They're physical on both sides. So I'm expecting a pretty close game overall, but I do think Georgia and Athens will be a little bit too much. I'm kind of just waiting on that typical Georgia performance, I guess you could say.
One of the games outside of the conference, well, semi outside of the conference, I guess you could say, the Red River rivalry. It's going to be the last time it's played every year, more than likely. I mean, I could be wrong on that. It may be they're two set teams. I could be wrong, but it's the last time the Red River rivalry is going to be played as Big 12 opponents. They're coming over to the SEC next year. The line is set at Texas 6.5. The over/under is 60.5. Oklahoma's been scoring hellacious amounts of points along with Texas. However, when Oklahoma plays a competent defense, they don't put up as many points. They played SMU, they only put up 28. When they played Cincinnati, they only put up 20. Everybody else, they put up 50 or more. Texas has put up 30. 31 is the lowest amount of points they've scored all year, and it was against Wyoming. They put up 34 on Bama, 37 on Rice, 38 on Baylor, 40 on Kansas. So I'm probably leaning the over just because these are two high-powered offenses, and they're going to give it everything they got. But these are two soon-to-be SEC teams playing in one of the best rivalries in college football, honestly. What do you think is going to happen this way? I think personally that Texas is going to be a Final Four college football playoff team this year. I think that they're the full package this year. I honestly do. I think their defense is relentless, and I think their offense is, as balanced as you can get. They got a great backfield. Quinn Ewers is one of the best quarterbacks in the country right now. What do you think is going to happen this weekend in the Red River rivalry?
Yeah, I think Texas is going to win, honestly. Not only what they did in Tuscaloosa beating Alabama, coming into Bryant-Denny, and obviously that was such a huge win for them. But to me, I've been just as impressed as what they've done after that,
Yeah.
because it's easy to kind of let your guard down, or maybe kind of play down to your competition, kind of ride that momentum or ride that wave of beating Alabama. You've seen it before, how teams will get up for that game and then dip back down to their competition, and kind of, I guess, reading their own press clippings, and things like that, just kind of, I don't know, just kind of resting on your laurels, I guess you could say. But they've really came out, handled business since then. I mean, impressive wins against Baylor, um, against a good Kansas team that they dominated most of that game. So I've been really impressed with what they've done after that, taking care of business, and showing like this is a different Texas team than some of the ones in the past. And like, hey, we went in and beat Alabama, but we're going to come out week in, week out, take care of our business, and play like a top 5 team, a championship caliber team, plays like. So I've been just as impressed with that as what they did in Tuscaloosa. So I'm like you. To be honest, I know a lot more about Texas than I do about OU. I really haven't watched Oklahoma a ton this year. Um, I'm not surprised though that they bounced back. They had a really, really disappointing year last year. They bounced back big time this year, and played to what they're capable of playing. So I'm expecting a really good game, but I think in the end, I think Texas is just too balanced, too good on both sides of the football. And I think Quinn Ewers and that offense pulls away, in the second half. But Greg Sankey's actually going to be there at the Red River rivalry this week, looking at his 2 new teams coming in next year. So last year it's a Big 12 game. It's going to be a SEC game going forward. As you mentioned, I would expect them to keep this. I mean, I don't see any way you get Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC and not keep the Red River rivalry. So I would anticipate them keeping that. It's one of the, as you mentioned, the premier rivalries in college football, and I like that they do it kind of in mid-season, and not at the end of the year. Obviously rivalry week, we have a lot of great games. Obviously the Iron Bowl, the Egg Bowl, Michigan, Ohio State, but I think it's cool that they do it, more early to mid-season, and don't wait to the end. But I'm expecting a great game in Dallas this week, but I'm gonna lean to take Texas.
I like it, and I got to complain. It's our podcast. I can complain if I want to. I never thought that when Gus Malzahn left Auburn that I would complain about Gus Malzahn ever again. However, I had an 8-leg parlay this weekend. $8 to win $757. 7 legs, W's. I've won 7 legs. The 8th leg that I need to hit is UCF minus 10.5. I believe they were a 12.5 point favorite when I took it, or 11.5, but I bought it down to 10.5 to give myself a little extra cushion. They go into halftime against Baylor, and they're up 28-10. I'm like, I'm going to win $757 on an $8 bet. I checked the score in the 4th quarter. UCF is losing 36-35. An absolute Gus Malzahn special. Took his foot off the gas when he's up hellacious amounts of points, up 3 possessions, takes his foot off the gas, and ends up losing it in the last few minutes of the football game. When I tell you, Gus Malzahn will haunt me for the rest of my life. He will never wear an Auburn shirt again, never wear an Auburn cap, never coach on Auburn sidelines ever again. And he will haunt me for the rest of my being because this freaking bet right here, I needed one more leg to hit. How crazy is it that I hit 7 of my 8 legs, and the 8th one I needed is coasting right through. And in the last few minutes of the game, they just crap the bed and lose 36-35 to a subpar Baylor team.
I will say this about betting too, and as bad as that sucks to lose an 8-legger in that kind of fashion, but aren't you glad, like, if they're gonna knock you out, aren't you glad they lost instead of like won by 5? Like if he'd have coasted and lost and say he only won by 5 instead of 10 and knocked you out, aren't you glad his sorry butt just went ahead and lost the game too? Like, I mean, not that it makes it hurt any less, because I mean a loss is a loss. You know, you pick a game, you either win it or you either cover or don't. But it's kind of like that's actually how my dad was. He was really bullish on LSU to cover this 2.5. He's like, I think LSU's gonna. He said, I think they're gonna win by 3, plain and simple. And he's like, when he realized too that LSU was up 2, Ole Miss is driving. He's like, I got no way of winning this now. He's like, I just hope the suckers just lose the ball game. Man. He's like, don't. The worst thing you can do is I need you to win by 2.5, and you win by 1. Like, I just assume you just lose. Yeah. So at least you can take a small bit of comfort in the fact that he did blow a 3-score lead, and he didn't win by 1 or win by 5. He lost it completely. Like I said, doesn't make it feel any bit better though. But yeah, it was a Gus Malzahn special.
I mean, good Lord.
To knock you out of $800 is just brutal. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, burn me, chap my rear end, dude. I was so mad. I was at a wedding, having a grand old time. When I saw that score, it depleted me. I was done. I was like, "You gotta be kidding me! Gotta be kidding me!"
And a parlay like that too, it is so difficult to even get to that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it is so difficult to get to 7 out of 8 or 6 out of 7, 9 out of 10, whatever it is. Like, it is so hard to just get to that point. And these teams are so Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, it's just so back and like you cannot predict this stuff, especially this year. I mean, I think it's going to be one of the crazier years we've had a long time, honestly. Maybe like 07. 07 was a crazy year, long time ago, but I think this year is gonna be wild down the stretch too. So it makes it that much harder. But to get to that point and lose it in that fashion doesn't get any more brutal than that, to be honest with you.
And Baylor missed the kick. So they were up. So UCF was up 28-10. There was like 3 seconds left. Baylor attempted a field goal right before half and missed the field goal. I'm like, all right. The stars are aligning. I'm going to get paid. Didn't even watch the second half. Just checked the score and was like, that was my face when I looked at my phone. I was like, you got to be kidding me, Gus Malzahn. You did your Gus Malzahn stuff and absolutely blew a game that you should have won by 15 touchdowns. But what are we doing?
Should we get Gus Malzahn? Well, I mean, obviously he's a lot older than us, so this probably wouldn't happen anyway. But we got to get Gus Malzahn or one of his kids or something to be a pallbearer at your funeral where he let you down one more time.
Yeah, exactly.
Just let me down easy one more time, Gus. But
that's a good one.
But anyways, man, that it's a brutal way to go. I'll be honest, I got to step it up on my bet picks as well. I've had a tough last couple of weeks. So
me too.
We're going to try our best to bounce back this week. Got a really fun week 6 ahead of us. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys back next week. Hope you enjoy your upcoming weekend. We're into October. It's only going to get crazier from here, and we really appreciate you guys tuning in.
Thank you, guys.